In this video, I wanted to tackle a big question for anyone dreaming of retiring abroad. Mexico versus Costa Rica. Where should you retire? Picture this, swapping cold winters for warm beaches, stretching your savings further, and picking between two of the hottest spots in Central America for retirees. Both have stunning scenery, welcoming vibes, and expat communities, but they're not the same. We're diving into the pros, cons, and nitty-gritty, lifestyle, costs, healthcare, safety, visas, all freshly updated information for 2025 and into 2026. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We put out daily videos with secret knowledge about Latin America, and you won't want to miss a video. So, why are Mexico and Costa Rica even on the radar? They've been retiree favorites forever. Close proximity to North America, very affordable compared to Canada or the US, and packed with natural beauty. Mexico has deserts, jungles, beaches, and colonial towns. Think Puerto Vallarta or San Miguel de Allende. Costa Rica is smaller, a lush green gem with rainforests, volcanoes, and coastlines like Tamarindo. Both draw expats for warm weather and a slower pace, but each has its own flavor. In this video, we're going to do a breakdown of Mexico versus Costa Rica with a specific eye to retirement. So first up is lifestyle. Mexico is gigantic. There's diverse vibes everywhere. If you like the beach, you have Puerto Vallarta, Playa del Carmen, Los Cabos. You have so many lively expat scenes with restaurants, markets, nightlife, and all different price points. If you prefer culture, you have places like San Miguel de Allende or Guanajuato that have art, history, and cobblestone charm. Inland spots like Mérida offer a quieter colonial feel with a rich heritage, and a lot of these colonial towns are also quite close to the beach as well. So in Mexico, you really have a lot of options. You have big cities, small towns, desert escapes, mountain towns, beach towns, jungle, desert, climates that are somewhat in the middle that kind of feel like California. So Mexico just has an absolute wide range of ecosystems and sizes of cities, ranging from, Mexico City as a mega city with 10 million plus people, to medium-sized cities like Guadalajara, to smaller cities like, say, Zacatecas or Aguascalientes, to small pueblos with 10, 15,000 people. But even those small pueblos in Mexico and in Costa Rica as well, they feel very lively. It feels much more lively than a small town in America. So regarding Costa Rica, it's a little bit more laid back. The pura vida is real. So think nature, hiking in Monteverde's cloud forest, surfing in Nosara, or chilling in Lake Arenal near the volcano. It's much less urban overall. Costa Rica, you have San Jose as the main hub city, but towns like Tamarindo mix expat energy with tranquility. Mexico is overall busier, Costa Rica is overall calmer, and Costa Rica really only has one city, and the rest is all very small towns. Whereas in Mexico, the population is more than 10 times as big, so you have a lot of different cities, but you can also escape the city and get into small towns as needed. Next, let's talk about cost of living. So both are cheaper than North America, but they differ. Mexico is generally more affordable. Rent, food, and basics cost less in Mexico than in Costa Rica's expat hubs like Escazú or Manuel Antonio. Groceries, think tacos or fresh produce, are a steal at Mexico's mercados, while Costa Rica leans pricier overall, especially for imported goods. Cars are much more expensive than Costa Rica. Electronics are much more expensive than Costa Rica. A lot more of the food is imported. Of course, Costa Rica does well with coffee and fruits and so forth, but it imports a lot as well. And Mexico is just a cheaper country to import to, probably due to NAFTA regulations. So anything that's imported into Mexico is going to be cheaper than anything that's imported into Costa Rica. Regarding housing, that's going to be a win for Mexico as well. Coastal condos or inland homes come cheaper than Costa Rica's beach towns, where demand has pushed prices up. Mexico is more wallet friendly, but Costa Rica is not outrageous if you avoid the tourist traps. Overall, Mexico is significantly cheaper than Costa Rica. People might be surprised to learn that, but it makes sense once you start peeling back the layers. It's just a bigger country, and therefore there's more supply of goods and services. Now let's move on to healthcare. So healthcare is obviously huge for retirees, and both countries deliver in this respect. One thing to consider is the public and private healthcare systems of each country. So Mexico has the IMSS public healthcare, which is very affordable, basically free for residents, and covers all your visits, meds, emergencies, that kind of thing. And then there's a lot of private options in Mexico as well, where there's English-speaking doctors, service is much faster, and still much cheaper than U.S. private care. So in Mexico, as an expat, you're probably going to lean more on the private system, and it's affordable though. So it's really the best experience. Me, myself, I live mostly in Mexico. I don't use the public system at all. I just go private. If I have to go to the emergency room, I go to a private hospital. It's not that expensive, and so forth. In Costa Rica, they have something called the Caja public system that you've probably heard of, because as a resident, you actually need to pay into the Caja system. So most people pay around, they have to pay, it's obligatory to pay. It's like a percentage of your income. So for the average person, they base it on $2,500 US, and then I think it's like 10% of that or something. So it's about $250 a month that people are paying into the Caja public healthcare system in Costa Rica. So you're paying into this public system anyway, so you might as well use it in Costa Rica. But Costa Rica does also have private healthcare, which can be top-notch. The clinics, especially in San Jose, the capital, rival first world standards, and they're less than U.S. prices. So both countries easily beat North America. You know, it's much better than the broken Canadian system. It's much better than the scammy, overpriced American system. And you'd be surprised. Like, most people absolutely rave about healthcare in Mexico. Healthcare in Costa Rica, I have a little bit less experience with, but by all the anecdotes that we receive on Twitter, people say that it's overall pretty good, and they're in and out, and they generally have a good experience. I think you'd probably find healthcare to be a little bit more expensive in Costa Rica as well. Salaries are generally higher there, and so forth. Now let's talk about safety. So this is a biggie for people, and perceptions differ. Mexico has a rep. The cartel headlines scare folks, admittedly. But expat zones like Merida or Lake Chapala are very calm and safer than some U.S. cities. If you stick to known areas, you're fine. Costa Rica doesn't have a perception issue, but you might find that the perception and the reality is a little bit different. Costa Rica's admittedly a little bit more dangerous than you might expect from the whole Pura Vida brand that they give themselves. By pretty much every anecdote that I've received about Costa Rica and Central America over the years, people say that Costa Rica is more dangerous than Nicaragua, and then obviously it's more dangerous than El Salvador, the safest country in the Americas. I don't think super bad things are going to happen to you in Costa Rica. You're never going to get kidnapped, probably. But there's a lot of petty crime in Costa Rica, where people joke about how, like, anything that's not nailed down on your property, like, people are just going to come steal. They'll come steal the lawnmower or, like, whatever random stuff you got laying around. I think part of that is due to the economy in Costa Rica not doing so well relative to the cost of living. It's very expensive for Costa Ricans to live in Costa Rica at their salaries. And so I think that has created a bit of a forcing function for them to engage in petty crime and sort of prey on the gringos a little bit more. So I think Costa Rica probably has a little bit more of like a us versus them mentality, like locals versus gringos, where in Mexico, they don't really have that. Everybody is basically chill with each other. And sure, Mexico, stuff could get stolen from your property too, or whatever you consider to be a safety issue. But overall, Mexico is very, very safe. Statistically, it's incredibly safe. Mexico had 40 million tourist visits in 2023 or 2024. And I think something like less than 10 Americans died. And mostly just by like drinking or being dumb. So statistically, you have a higher likelihood of dying, staying at home than you do traveling to Mexico, which is kind of funny to think about. So Mexico, much safer than you realize, and Costa Rica, probably slightly less safe than you realize. And which one is safer, Mexico or Costa Rica? It's probably about a tie, honestly. It's probably about equal. Maybe I'd give a slight edge to Costa Rica, but it's about equal. Now let's talk about visa options. So how do you stay in Mexico and Costa Rica? So in Mexico, they have the temporary resident visa, and sometimes you can get permanent residency off the bat. Basically, you just have to demonstrate steady income from pensions or savings or earned income. It's around $4,000 a month of earned income, or about $75,000 in savings for a single adult, and then probably increase that by about 30% for a couple. And then you can go direct to permanent residency if you're above a certain age, like kind of 60 plus, and also if you have significant assets. If you can show about 300K plus in savings, then that'll edge you into permanent residency territory. In Costa Rica, it's a little bit different. So they have the pensionado visa where you prove pension income. They also have the rentista visa if you have savings or rentals. Both let you settle long term. Mexico's visa is very quick. Costa Rica takes a little bit longer to get approved, but when you apply, you're allowed to continue staying in Costa Rica. Another difference is that the Costa Rican process typically starts in Costa Rica, where you apply directly in the country, whereas in Mexico, the process typically starts in your home country, so in the US. So you can apply from the comfort of your own home, which a lot of people find very convenient because it gives them time to kind of plan things, and they don't even have to go to Mexico until they're already approved for the residency. Worth noting that MyLatinLife is a full-scale immigration consultancy. We can help you get residency in Mexico. We can get you residency in Costa Rica. We get people residency in every country in Latin America. So we also do, Panama, Argentina, Paraguay, Dominican Republic, any country you need in Latin America, we can get you residency. There's a link in the description where you can book a call with us. You can become our client. You'll be speaking with me directly. We're going to lay out all your options, the pros and cons of residency in Mexico versus Costa Rica versus wherever else you might be thinking of. And we can get this residency in your hands very quickly. Like our clients, they'll have Mexico residency in their hand in less than 30 days a lot of the times. So we're probably the best out there at what we do. So I highly recommend you book a call with us. It's going to be absolutely life-changing, and it will completely change the way that you plan your future. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about accessibility. So Mexico is closer with much more flight connections, especially for Americans. Pretty much every American city has direct flights to pretty much every Mexican city, which is huge. And then for Canadians, there are direct flights from Toronto to all over Mexico. Montreal has very good direct flights as well. Vancouver has less, but it's increasing. Calgary has less, but it's increasing. But overall, it's going to be easier to get to Mexico than it is to Costa Rica. Costa Rica, most especially Canada. Canada's pretty good about having direct flights to Costa Rica, but U.S. cities, not so much. So with the U.S., you're more likely to have direct flights to Mexico, whereas with Costa Rica, you might end up having layovers in Panama or Mexico City, things like that. So that's something to consider, because me personally, I always try to optimize for having direct flights. And if you're a person that's mobile a lot, that maybe needs to pop back home once a quarter or things like that, this is something to definitely keep in mind. But overall, both countries are very accessible. They're really quite close. This is all, kind of part of North America. And it's going to be easier to access Costa Rica than, say, Argentina or Uruguay or even somewhere in Europe. So overall, both countries are very accessible. Flights will probably be cheaper to Mexico as well, just due to higher demand and sort of more frequency of flights. Moving on to community, Mexico has massive expat groups. By some numbers, there's 1.7 million Americans living in Mexico. Now, a lot of those are dual citizen Mexican Americans, but it's fair to say that pretty much anywhere in Mexico that you go, you're going to meet a lot of gringos, but you're also going to meet a lot of locals as well, and there's kind of a good, healthy balance. Costa Rica is a little bit different, where it's smaller with tight-knit expats in places like Tamarindo or Arenal. Pretty much any beach town in Costa Rica is going to have a good expat group. You might find that the expat groups in Costa Rica skew a little bit more hippie, yoga, surf bum type of thing, where the expats in Mexico might be more digital nomads, business owners, and generally a little bit more, I don't want to say affluent, but a little bit more, a little bit less crunchy granola and a little bit more just like working professional, I guess you would say. Mexico feels more familiar. I think you'll find a larger range of communities, while Costa Rica is cozier. Costa Rica is going to be smaller communities, smaller towns, whereas Mexico, maybe you feel a little bit more anonymous, but it really depends where you go in Mexico. So both countries probably have some of the best expat communities in all of Latin America. Literally, I think those would probably be the top two countries in terms of expat community and where you're going to find your community. You're going to find your tribe. So I think for both countries, you can't go wrong with that. So what's next? I mean, this year is prime. Tourism is up. Mexico is booming. There's new airports on the way. Costa Rica has been an expat favorite for probably 20 years. Mexico, I think, has been growing majorly as an expat hub. And I think more and more people are starting to move towards Mexico just due to the lower cost of living. So what's best for you? Long story short, I think Mexico is best for most people. I think the high cost of living in Costa Rica will turn people off. But I think Costa Rica, probably the big benefit there is they have what's called a territorial tax system, which means that they do not tax foreigners. They don't tax anybody on foreign sourced income. So they will only tax you on Costa Rican sourced income, which you won't really have any Costa Rican sourced income unless you start a local Costa Rican business running a gas station or something. So for people who are like millionaires and super, super rich, I think Costa Rica makes more sense so that you can live in peace and comfort knowing that you don't have to deal with any complicated tax issues. Now, Mexico is very chill about taxes, and being a resident of Mexico does not automatically make you a tax resident of Mexico. It's a little bit of a complicated topic. I've made videos about this in the past, and if you have any more direct questions, again, you can book a call with MyLatinLife. There's a link in the description, and we can talk about taxes in Mexico. We can talk about anything Mexico versus Costa Rica. But there's a little bit of an overview for you, Mexico versus Costa Rica for retirement. So hit that like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on for notifications every time we put out a new video, and we'll see you in the next video.